Brace yourself. Gonna blast up anytime now. Collect yourself. Things will never be the same in this sad, sad world. Walk around the light a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So slip back in your hole.
So welcome everybody, good to be with you today. I want to start with very briefly sort of reviewing and reframing what we talked about in the first part of the lecture, and then there's just a couple more points to make, and we will wrap it up for this module. So yesterday we were talking about a couple of almost modern day, they're both dead now, but not for super long, a couple of modern day Jedis, knights in combat against the empire of work, the evil empire. Josef Pieper, who we've been with for several weeks, as the author of Leisure, the Basis of Culture, and Norris Clarke, the author of The One and the Many. What led me to connect these two and to bring in Norris Clarke and his metaphysics was when Pieper said this. He said that leisure is the soul's power as real of responding to the real. Leisure is contemplative beholding and immersion in the real. I added the capitalization of real there to help clarify what he's talking about. The real, that which is, being itself. So Pieper himself, though he's not doing metaphysics in Leisure, the Basis of Culture, is referring to metaphysics, the third of those three ingredients in our worldview. And if we haven't thought about what our metaphysics is, if we haven't even realized that we have one, then part of our worldview is just based on, I don't know. And people decide how to live, how to die, how to kill based on their worldview. And if part of our worldview is rooted in, I don't know, whatever, I guess, then we might be making those life or death decisions on very flimsy grounds. You agree with me, Maddie? Oh, Maddie said yes. She said, yes, I agree with you, Mr. Childers, because you're awesome and brilliant and young. Maddie, you're definitely young. Let me tell you, that's... Show of hands, who here asked Rhea anything? Maria Mora? All right, this lecture now will include a reading of the entire book, start to finish, slowly. Right. So that's... thank you, Kevin. Anyways, Kevin, thank you, Kevin. This video's going great so far. This is really good. I hope the new assistant principal walks in and evaluates me here. Here's something Norris Clarke says about the real, about existence. All the beings that make up the world of my experience reveal themselves as not just present, standing outside of nothingness, but actively presenting themselves to others and vice versa by interacting with each other. It is the very nature of real being to pour over into action that is self-revealing and self-communicative. Let's take this image as a metaphor for being, for reality, for existence itself. And I want to give full disclosure here, so you don't think I'm trying to sneak something in behind the scenes. I'm not going here, but this is both Clarke and Pieper's definition of God. The subsistent act of to be itself, being itself, is their definition of God. I'm not making that leap with you right now. I'm talking about being as being. Let's consider this picture a metaphor of reality. And what's depicted in this picture? We've got to imagine the being in this chalice, the goodness, the truth. This is liquid goodness, truth, and beauty in this chalice. And we've got to imagine that the supply is infinite. And yet the goodness, truth, and beauty of being is so full that it cannot help but pour out of itself, to flow out of itself. Problem, there is no out of itself because it is being itself. And yet, nevertheless, it flows out. And all the drops, all the splashes, everything that flows out of the chalice is every real being of this universe or this multiverse, if there be such a thing. It's Gavin and the chair he's sitting on and every atom that makes up his body. And Kevin, have you ever been happy? And his happiness. Kevin, are you happy right now? Yeah, and his current and his sadness, which he no longer feels, but is real. Every being in reality is like a drop flowing out of this chalice. And yet, we said we had to imagine it infinite. And so, as it flows out of itself, it doesn't get empty. It doesn't decrease. The liquid goodness is not made out of beings. It's not made out of anything, right? It's not the composite of all these little drops. It has no parts. It is not composite because as the drops flow out, it doesn't decrease at all. It simply is. But every being that flows out of it, it's not made up of them, but every being that flows out of it is nothing other than it, is nothing other than a participation in existence itself. There is one existence that manifests itself in many, many, many real beings. And in doing this, the ideas are Norris Clarke's, building on a long tradition, but the ideas are Norris Clarke's. I chose the image, but the ideas are Norris Clarke. In doing this, and you'll have to explore Clarke on your own to see how if you're interested, but in doing this, Clarke has done the near impossible. Clarke stands in the tradition of Aristotle, and he has managed in many ways to reconcile Aristotle with Plato. If you've taken my humanities class, you know that the lightsaber battle between Plato and Aristotle is fundamental to our civilization. Okay. The one, the many. Every being mirrors, images being itself. Every being also has the dual axes of oneness and manyness. I am one being, the same me I was the day I was born, though I have almost no, not even the atoms in me are the same. I don't look the same, and yet I'm still me. The same me stands here teaching, the same me that did all the stupid things I did through my 20s and 30s and up and through my 40s and all the stupid things I will do through my, I'm guessing like I got like 10 more years in me, and through my mid-50s when I finally check out of old age. There's one me, and yet I am built for manyness, for interacting with the people around me and the world around me, the beings around me in this universe, in this multiverse. And we took that model, those two axes, and we used it to evaluate the three systems that are working together to build up the empire of work. We evaluated capitalism, we evaluated communism, and we evaluated Nazism based on those two axes. Now we're going to return to leisure. Another term for leisure is recreation. Remember, we got on this whole Norris Clarke tangent because Pieper says leisure is what puts us in communion with the real. So I started yesterday. Maddie, come join me. All right, Maddie, you are a dancer, is this right?
Yes.
All right, give us one. I'm kidding.
Just like no.
I'm kidding. Yes. So, do you love dancing?
Yes.
Okay. Do you love cleaning toilets?
No.
Okay. Would you rather be dancing or cleaning toilets?
Dancing?
Hang on. Something's not right here. But Maddie, what takes more physical energy out of you? Dancing or cleaning toilets?
Dancing.
You would rather, this nut would rather do the thing that is more difficult, more strenuous than the easier thing? Why?
It gives me satisfaction.
Satisfaction. Why? Because I think I asked the love question too early, because she loves it. You love dancing, right? It's your form of recreation. You notice recreation, we could put a hyphen between the E and the C. Recreation means recreation. We are most ourselves in our leisure, in our recreation. We recreate ourselves because it's in our leisure that we are doing the things that we love, the things that we choose. And if we choose something, it is a much more pure reflection of who we really are. Why is leisure the basis of culture? It is because in leisure, in Maddie's dance, she is at her Maddiest. You are the most Maddie you could possibly be, which means you are the most real you can possibly be, at least in the models of Pieper and Clarke. You are most open to reality. You exist more when you are at leisure. We don't usually think of existence as being something that has grades, something that it stages. So you can exist more or less, but it does. Let me illustrate. So there's Maddie, and I've got my idea of Maddie in my head. They both exist, but one of them exists a lot more. That Maddie exists more than my idea of Maddie. The Maddie on the dance stage exists more than the Maddie standing here, and I hope at very least that the Maddie standing here exists more than the Maddie cleaning toilets. Do you prefer my class to cleaning toilets?
It's a tough comparison.
Go sit down. We're reading the whole book. Thanks, Maddie. Thanks, Maddie. And hopefully you get, I'm not just talking about dance. We've got soccer on there, but it could be art, it could be music, it could be gaming, whatever you do that you're passionate about, whatever you're... Leisure, leisure. I am one with the real. I am one with the force is with me. I'm one with the force is with me. Is it done, or am I just hallucinating? It's like an oasis in the desert. Yeah. Oh my goodness. How embarrassing for me. When I'm talking about what counts as leisure, that raises a little side issue I want to bring up. I don't know if anybody watched or listened to it, but I did recommend a couple of podcasts about leisure, the basis of culture, on YouTube. There were two of them. One was just audio, and one was a video where you got to see the podcasters, because that's how videos works. I'm doing great. I am doing great. The video one was called the Burrowshire Podcast. And look, I thought it was a really good discussion. Otherwise, I wouldn't have recommended it to you. But I want to take issue with something. I want to take issue with one point that the participants here made when they were talking about leisure, the basis of culture, because it's a point that's almost always made by anyone that I've encountered talking about this book. So I forget which one of them said it, because it's been a couple of years since I watched the podcast. But they said something like this: real leisure, all right, when you're just like vegging out in front of Netflix, that's not real leisure, because it doesn't recreate you. I don't have much patience for elitism. I don't have much patience for the notion that the things you actually enjoy are somehow inferior to the things that we actually enjoy. And I don't mean that these are like elitist people in the way that they live their lives, but if you enjoy vegging out in front of Netflix, well, guess what? There is some phenomenal storytelling on Netflix. They wouldn't say that attending a Shakespeare play is not real leisure. They wouldn't say reading the Iliad or listening to Beethoven is not real leisure. And they wouldn't say that playing sports is not real leisure. So I'm not, I do veg out on Netflix and other things, but, I'm not a gamer, but who am I to say that your video gaming is not real leisure? Because it's just us lowly common folks that do it. So I'd like to divorce this conversation from any hint of elitism. But then that raises a question. This is a question that came to me in the moment as I was given this lecture last semester. Is there a limit to what counts as real leisure? Are the things, and none of us, I've never met a perfect human being. So all of us occasionally have habits, things that we choose to do that we probably know or at least think we ought not to do. Are things that we like doing, that we choose doing, but which are morally problematic, is that real leisure? Is that recreative of ourselves? Is getting intoxicated, is that leisure? Is watching pornography leisure? Is playing a violent video game where you're imagining yourself victimizing people leisure? We could take it to the absurd. We know Jeffrey Dahmer liked to kill and eat people. All right, that's what he liked. Was that? And so does Naya, right? Is that leisure? Is that recreate him? Is that what puts him in contact with the real, just because it's what he likes? Everybody in a conversation about sexual morality will have some of those conversations in the roundtables. Everybody's going to define the particulars of sexual morality a little differently, but if there is a type of sexual behavior that you believe is wrong but still want to do, is that leisure? I think I know what Josef Pieper would say. So, on the question of sex, when it comes to sex within the confines of marriage, remember when A.J. Swoboda, he made the joke about his parents napping on Sunday afternoon, and we all understood what he really meant by them. I think Swoboda and Pieper would say, well, of course, yes, that's real leisure, but other sexual activities, if we define them as morally illicit, is that real leisure? I don't know. Maybe that's something, not just the sex question, but the question of is there a limit to what counts as real leisure? Can immoral things actually be recreative? Can they be leisure? Maybe you could explore that in some of your roundtable topics when relevant. That's not a command. Throw everything away that you've done. Marie Moore, you probably should. I imagine everything you've done is not very good. But the rest, you don't throw everything away that you've done and start over, just on my count. But I do have a thought. And this didn't just occur to me in this moment, but it just occurred to me over the weekend. Maybe our one in the many axis has something to say about whether something is genuine leisure. If I've chosen to engage in an activity that builds me up, builds up my sense of self, my sense of identity, and builds up my virtues, makes me more into the kind of person that I want to be, or at very least doesn't harm those things. And if I'm involved in an activity that builds up my connection with other people, that strengthens relationships, not only between me and people, but amongst people, or at very least doesn't negatively impact those, perhaps that's a sign that it's genuine leisure. And on the contrary, if the behaviors I'm interested in are self-destructive, are disintegrate relationships, foster conflict and contempt and hatred, maybe that's a good sign that they aren't, but I'm just throwing that out there as a maybe. We're at the last slide and therefore the last point. But I'm going to take a sip of water and these people are just going to have to wait. It refreshes. It's delightful. Kevin asked what my favorite LaCroix flavor is. Jordan, you know what my LaCroix flavor? What? Yes, it's LaCroix, so it's carbonated water, lightly fruit flavored, unsweetened. Yeah. What's that? He's asking. No, Kristen wants his lecture to be over so bad, but yeah. Why do you hate me, Kristen?
It's just how it is.
Yeah, just how it is. Okay. Back to seriousness. Back to the final point. You probably you probably noticed that Pieper concludes the essay by presenting the ultimate act of leisure, and since leisure is the basis of culture, then the ultimate expression of human culture, and since culture is what makes us uniquely human, then the ultimate expression of our humanity as worship, religious worship for Pieper, is the apex, the high point of what it is to be human. Interestingly, here Pieper is not making a religious point. He could, he's religious, but he's making a cultural point. Because he doesn't only cite examples from his own Christian faith, he cites examples from ancient Greek pagan cults. It actually doesn't matter. Hear carefully what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. It doesn't matter for this point what one is worshiping. I'm not saying that it necessarily doesn't matter who or what you worship, but for this point, the dynamic is the same whether one worships Christ or Zeus or Odin. When one worships, one is connected to a large community that transcends not only space but time. Because unless you've invented a religion yourself and not told anyone about it, the religious worshiper is part of a community that stretches back through the ages. And there the person offers himself or herself to his or her understanding of what's most real. And one opens oneself to receive whatever is on offer from whatever it is that's most real. It is in that having that dynamic of both offering, giving of oneself and receiving simultaneously, one is, according to Pieper, put in the highest level of communion with reality. There's something in Pieper's model of reality itself that very much patterns, and this is no accident because Pieper comes from a Christian tradition, and specifically the Roman Catholic tradition, which puts a very high emphasis on communion, the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper. There's something Eucharistic about reality in Pieper's vision. In the Lord's Supper, Christians share in a meal of bread and wine that they believe put them in communion with the flesh and blood of Christ. But it's inexhaustible. It's not like once Jesus weighs 180 pounds, once 180 pounds of bread have been eaten, game over. It's an inexhaustible giving of self and receiving and so forth. And Pieper views reality itself that same way. I don't think that's an accident. We in our culture are in a process of moving away from religious worship being at the center of our identity. You may think that's a good thing, you may think that's a bad thing, you may think that's a neutral thing. I think it's a complicated thing. All important questions are complicated. This in 2024, the Pew Research Center, which tracks religious demographic information, for the first time, the largest single religious group in the United States, at 28% of the population, are what's called nuns. Not nuns like religious sisters, N-O-N-E-S. Those who say, I really don't practice any religion. That's the largest. By saying that, they're not counting Christianity as one thing, but they're counting evangelical Protestantism, mainline Protestantism, Catholic Christianity, Orthodox as separate. So when they do it that way, the people who are not religious are are the majority, and all trends point to that continuing. It may be good, it may be bad, it may be neutral. But it's new. We've never encountered a human culture that we know anything about that didn't have religious worship at the center of their culture, at the center of their understanding of what it is to be human. They worshipped many, many, many different things, but remember, for this cultural point, it really doesn't matter what they're worshiping, and it really doesn't matter if Christ or Zeus or Odin are real for this point. That has been for so long such a core part of who we are that the lingering question now is, if that is really something that we are preparing as a species to retire, with what will we replace it? What will take the place of this openness to the real and this openness to sacrificial self-giving, which is the definition of agape love? I don't have an answer to that. I think about it a lot. I won't share my thoughts about it unless you ask me after you graduate, but interesting. So that is Leisure, the Basis of Culture, as mangled by me over the course of 4 lectures. Any final thoughts, objections, questions? Not from Gavin. He sucks. You're laughing at me saying Gavin sucks as if you don't suck. That's something. Now I've seen it all. That's all I need from you for today. The rest of the time is yours.
Walk around a lot a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So slip back in your hole, or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me.